Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy day to join us today, and welcome to A Vision for 2020, Big Predictions for the Future of Talent. We're really excited for today's content and so glad you could join for our discussion. Before we get started, just a couple of notes. If you can hear my voice, you've already done it right, but please connect to our streaming audio via your computer speakers or headphones today. All participant lines are currently muted to avoid background noise. If you have any trouble connecting to audio, you can feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen and send me a note there and I can try to help you out. Or call Ready Talk support at 800-843-9166. I'll type this into the chat box in a little while for your reference in case you need it. In case you miss anything during today's presentation, or you want to go back and review or share with a friend, we wouldn't hate that. We will send out the slide deck and the recording following the session, so keep an eye on your inbox. That should come in the next day or so. And finally, any questions at all that you have on the content today, we will be saving a little bit of time at the end of the webinar for Q&A. So please use that Q&A box, and we'll get through as many questions as we can. So I'd like to say a little welcome to our speakers today. So happy to have these three very knowledgeable experts on the call today. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. Care to give a little, just a little introduction to who you are and,
Sure.
and what you care about?
Absolutely. So my name is Mike Hennessy. I'm the founder and CEO here at SmashFly, and started the company 11 years ago in January. So we founded the company in 2007 and been building what we call a recruitment marketing platform. So excited to be on the call today. We're really focused on top of the funnel. How do we find, attract, and engage, nurture candidates into top quality candidates? So excited to be part of the conversations around some of these future trends and some of the macro trends that we're seeing in the space. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Thom, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. It's Thom Kenney. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of SmashFly. Pretty excited to be here today talking about this because it's a real passionate thing of mine, machine learning and AI, thinking about talent acquisition and the things that we can do to really create purposeful engagement between candidates and companies is something that I think is a really, really big trend for us in the future. And excited to share some of these ideas with Mike and Parker here.
Wonderful. And that leads us to Parker. Parker, want to say a few words about who you are?
Sure thing. First, thanks for having me today, guys. My name is Steve Parker. As you'll hear everyone on this call, and most people I associate with, they just call me Parker. So feel free to do the same if we ever meet in person. I'm the director of a global RPO technology practice at Allegis Global Solutions. What we do is recruitment process outsourcing solutions for clients as well as MSP on contingent labor management side. Excited to be here today to talk about this too. I've got about 20 years in technology. 5 of those focused with AGS just on talent acquisition technology, and it's an excellent time to be a technologist and to really start to dig into this realm because there's so many great things happening. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, we're really excited to have all three of you on the call today, and I know you have a lot of expertise to share on this particular topic, the future of talent acquisition. So, Mike, I'm going to let you kind of kick us off here. As you may have noticed signing up, everyone, this is the first in a series of quarterly conversations called our C-Series. So, Mike, would you like to introduce that, and then we'll jump right in?
Sure. So we decided this year to really set up, as Ali mentioned, a quarterly series of talks from executives, both at SmashFly and some of our partners, speaking to HR executives out in the field. And the goal is really to have that conversation about the changes that we're seeing in the marketplace, helping you hopefully stay ahead of the leading curve and making sure that you're thinking about these topics in your organizational leadership in terms of how you're doing talent acquisition in your going forward. So this is one of the first 4, and hopefully we'll be able to continue these conversations over the next next 4 quarters. So I think we can get started with the first one.
Okay, sounds good. Mike, thanks for the intro there. And so let's take a look at this first prediction. Probably one of the more broadly interesting one, and a lot of buzzword bingo actually out there in the marketplace today around machine learning and AI. But what we're really starting to see in the industry is it's got implications in multiple areas of the candidate lifecycle. That might be from omni-channel sourcing on the front of the process to even onboarding on the back end. But we're seeing things in between that, such as marketing, sourcing, screening, and assessments. And there's just a broad range of implications. So if you move out of the broader AI definition, you're really getting into natural language processing, which you're going to see with conversational AI, and we'll talk about that. But you also get into pure machine learning that you see within a lot of the data processing that we do as part of a candidate lifecycle process. So one of those first areas on the front end, if you think about candidate engagement at the point of interest, is really around conversational AI or chatbots. What's happening with chatbots is they're taking a much broader and bigger role in the candidate experience. So they kind of start at the point of interest on the point of interest on the front of the career site, but they're also spreading out to things like interview scheduling, employee referrals, internal employee engagement. That's kind of a big one because what we're seeing is people are utilizing this natural language processing and AI to show candidates a specific experience, which is great because they're engaged at the point of interest as soon as they hit the career site. But also turning that same mechanism internally to their employees, because hiring managers are asking, of the talent acquisition team, they're asking the same questions. Where's my interview guide? Who's our CEO? Hopefully they know that. What is the policy on this particular thing? And what you can do is join that external culture that you're showing to candidates and bring that internal culture as well to your employees, and joining those two things together with chatbots. So we're seeing that conversational AI pick up there and really provide some great insights on both sides, not just the candidates, but internal employees as well. You see things like employee referral, where it's easy enough to enter information into a bot. That bot can then take the information provided, whether that's email address or phone number, reach out to the person being referred, and actually move into the screening realm at that point as well. So not only can you do what we think of as an ask functionality, where you could, a candidate could ask any type of question about the organization on the front of the career site, such as, do you offer benefits? Do you have insurance? What was your revenue last year for a publicly traded company? But you can also use the bot to actually screen candidates as well for particular job families. So you can put in a number of questions and responses. The candidates can actually be screened. They can be given a green, yellow, or red light to move forward in the process, and then engage with the recruiter immediately if they're qualified. The bots can also now get into interview scheduling as well, so they can take that candidate, look at particular open slots on a recruiter's calendar, and then go ahead and schedule an interview. This is really good for candidates that are very well qualified. They pass the first screening. Other data can be gathered on the back end, say their LinkedIn profile, to see if they're qualified, and put them directly through to a recruiter instead of having them wait to go through an apply process. So a lot of great things happening in the chatbot realm in the conversational AI space.
Hey, Parker,
and I think yes.
Just a quick question. So as you're in the front of this with some of the chatbots, how do you think the chatbots are being perceived by candidates and end users? And I got a question from a VC firm recently that said, are these just a fad, or do you think these are these really here to stay? How do you see that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we're seeing from candidates, so we've helped a company launch a global recruiting bot, if you will, that responds to you differently depending on the region of the world that you're in. And what we're finding is a lot of people are responding to the bot in the conversations we're seeing. They're responding to the bot in a more natural way. They're thanking the chat bot. So 70-80% of the people we see actually thank the chat bot. And so if that tells you a little bit about the psychology that's happening on the front end of the process, I think if they stay in the realm of just asking questions, then it would be a fad. But what you're seeing is it starts to move up the value chain a little bit more for organizations. So I think it's something that's going to take better hold. I think it's going to expand from just asking questions to screening and to scheduling, as it's already doing, and those capabilities are there. But I think it gets deeper in the stack too. If you think about onboarding on the back end of the process or just employee engagement in general to be able to answer questions, I think you're going to see a much broader use of that. Next level of it is if you connect it to the right data sources internally, say HRIS data or VMS or CRM on the front end, it gets a little bit more like what we call cognitive response. So it knows who you are, it knows the information about you as you go through the process. So just to shed a little light on that, I hope that helped.
And I think one of the things I was thinking about is, do you think there's a natural evolution of those kind of chatbots to the home assistant devices like Alexa and Google Home and to the Apple Pod, where you've got that conversational style of asking questions through a chatbot and converting that to voice-based questions seems like a natural trend that could happen, right? Where people just get used to that conversation and start using their voice to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's a good question too, and I'll let you guys chime in on this one as well. But I don't much see the headless AI as in somebody has a Google Home or they have an Alexa sitting at their desk, for example. What I more see with that is if you look at your Pixel 2 or you're working with Siri or whatever, the integration to those particular things, like for example on the Pixel 2 now you can squeeze the frame and the assistant comes up and you can ask the assistant questions. I more see it the mobile route because you'll have the assistant with you at all times to be able to do that. So that's the direction I kind of see it going once you get further adoption down the stack. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that.
What do you think long term about this? We're talking about cognitive intelligence with understanding the candidate process. One of the things that's really interesting is how Watson's using natural language processing, in particular with sentiment analysis, to get us to a point that chatbots could potentially have emotional intelligence as well as artificial intelligence, understanding a bit the motivations of the candidate. Do you think that helps with the chatbot and create a better connection between candidate and company?
I mean, I think it will. I think anytime we've got, and we're going to talk about this concept in a few minutes too, but there's a concept now of doing a talent data store. So we think about machine learning as maybe a chatbot, or we think about it as maybe screening resumes. But there's a broader capability now where managing large amounts of data and connecting those into what we call a talent data store. So imagine you could do, for example, your CRM, your ATS, your HRIS, or your learning management system or performance management into one place. And you can do that. That's real technology that's out there today. So once that's done, if you were to connect the bot to that and then combine your surveys or assessments of your internal groups into that, into the algorithm, then the bot can feed off of that. Those are all things that can be done today and can be tweaked today. It's just organizations that are just getting to the point of adopting some of the machine learning, if that helps. So what are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I think that I see that this becoming, we're talking about the future predictions. It's hard to predict the future, but I think just looking at the momentum that's already out in the marketplace and how candidates are interfacing with, not just companies in terms of jobs, but for consumer goods or just general Q&A, you could see with the machine learning and some of the additional technology that's coming on, they're just going to get smarter and smarter and smarter. And so I don't think this is from where I sit, this isn't a matter of, hey, is this going to be around in 3 or 4 or 5 years? I think it's just going to grow in momentum and just be much more prevalent, so that if you don't have this type of technology on your career site or your site where candidates can get that quick, easy access to information, you're going to be behind the curve. So I think this is it's here to stay.
And I just add that machine learning really, it's not even the future. It's absolutely now. If you look at one of SmashFly's Fortune 50 customers is doing today, they've got an entire artificial intelligence and machine learning team that's dedicated just to the CHRO, specifically to the talent acquisition team. So when we talk about machine learning and artificial intelligence, we really are talking in today's vernacular about how we're engaging people, leveraging this technology already. It's a prediction for the future that it will grow, but we've got folks that are actively pursuing this and being successful at it.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I think what we're hearing when we're out there in the market for clients and installing systems, more and more they're asking us to help them build their AI stack. And what they mean by that is they mean a full technology suite, recruitment, marketing, CRM, applicant tracking system. but they're thinking of it more as having interwoven machine learning and AI capabilities to that entire stack. And so, as part of that, you're seeing a couple of different things come across. One of those is, imagine a candidate going to your career site, especially around chatbots and conversational AI, but machine learning as well. They go to your career site, they're entering information, talking to the bot, being screened, and as they are showing the interest in what they do and indicating things about themselves, the career site behind them is dynamically changing. That's real technology that can actually happen today. So to your point, Thom, it's already here. In addition to that, you're seeing companies, such as SmashFly, for example, opening up their ecosystem, right, or opening up their APIs to allow a lot of this machine learning, almost machine learning as a service, to be able to come into the platforms. And so as the APIs get more open, we think of it as services-enabled architecture is what we call it. But at that point, you can plug in the different services where you need them as part of the process, because integration is actually getting easier and more secure than it's ever been. And so instead of having to buy a point solution for AI, you can actually implement that into your current stack and build a roadmap to build an AI stack. And use machine learning as a service, right? Use it for integrated search and match. Use it to screen candidates. Use it to drive your natural language processing with your bot. To Thom's point, these are all real technologies that are happening right now.
Yep. Prediction number 2.
So if we take the next step to the next prediction for employer brands and consumer brands, the word synonymous we think is really important, because we're looking forward to when a brand for a company's products and services and a brand for a particular employer are becoming one and the same. Recent statistics show that 64% of people who have a negative engagement during a recruiting process would choose not to shop at a company that provided those goods and services. And I think we've even seen probably the most public release of this type of engagement between employer brand and product brand is when the New York Times published what it was like to work inside of Amazon Web Services. There was a big backlash with media online talking about how if this is the type of company that treats their employees this way, why are we shopping on Amazon Web Services? Now, you could argue with the size and the weight of someone like Amazon, it was a small factor, but in the end, it's still a factor. And when we talk about the brand and employer synonymous connection between the two, it's really because if people love your brand, they love your product, they're going to be interested in working for you. So that connection really moves us away from saying, what is my employer brand, to really what is just the brand for my company. If we talk about why that's important, just look at the investment that a lot of Fortune 500 companies are doing right now. They're investing in what people are saying on Glassdoor. They're investing in what people are saying on the Muse. And they're doing it in a way to both encourage people to understand what their purpose is, what their mission is. So as candidates are looking at companies, this is one of those areas that they're reviewing before they actually go in and apply. What is it like to work for this company? What is it like to be an employee? So when you look at the employment and consumer perspective, the organizations really need a compelling brand-led drive for loyalty. And this is especially true amongst younger generations. When I look at my daughters and I look at their friends and I look at how they interoperate, just look at the focus on Instagram. Just look at the focus on online connections for information and for needs. And companies are driving value through those. So if you talk about the Instagram generation, to loosely reference Generation Z, by 2020, this is going to make up 20% of our workforce, and the millennials right now are the largest of the workforce. And as you talked about a little bit earlier, Parker, being connected to their mobile devices, being connected to what is more important to many, many young folks today. It's not the desktop computer, it's not the laptop, it's their mobile device, which in many cases is more powerful than the machines that they have at home. So if we're talking about consumer brands, we're talking about brands that have a lot of awareness in the marketplace, like Coca-Cola, how do we extend that brand? How do we get them excited? We need to actually take the place of the consumer brand as an employer brand. The employer's perception of what they need to deliver to these younger generations and to the workforce as a whole is really transforming. So if we look at where we're going in the future, there are companies that are investing in what that external perception is. If you look at some recent examples of companies that you may not think are really that glamorous, like Thomson Reuters, Thermo Fisher, or Aramark, there are studies that have pulled these brands out as brands that are really engaged and compelling on Instagram. And if you're a small company, or if you're a large company that's worried about the small companies that are grabbing talent that you'd really like to have, it's really understanding that brand and the way we're messaging that brand as an employer and as a product is going to be really, really important.
Yeah, I think that to double down on that, I just think that the data now supports this idea that a company needing to invest in their employment brand as much as they invest in their existing brand shows that the performance of the company is actually increases significantly, right? So those companies that are tying those two things together, the business actually outperforms those that don't. And I think even in the recruitment marketing world that we're in, and as we talk to these large Fortune 500 companies, one of the trends that we're seeing is that the TA and the talent acquisition organization and the marketing organizations are coming together much more closely than they ever did before because of some of these outside factors that are driving it, right? If you think about Glassdoor and how companies start thinking about what is that doing to not just the employees, but the attraction from prospects or leads, but also from business. Now marketing is made aware of that, and so they're kind of incentivized to get ahead of it. So this isn't happening just happenstance. There is actual business drivers that are forcing companies to think much more holistically of, hey, this is what our brand is, whether we're talking to prospects, investors, or employees or leads or candidates.
And that's really what we're talking about, Mike, with purposeful employment, right? Creating that connection between candidates, the social and emotional connections to the actual job. It's not really the job description that is really exciting people today. It's this engagement. It's this engagement before the formal application process even starts. And Parker, I'm sure you see this with the scope that you guys have across the world. It's got to be something that's forefront in your mind.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as these become synonymous within this too, you especially see this in the retail world with some of the large retailers we work with. And I spent some time at a large retailer here on the East Coast, especially around the consumers being customers, right? Because they could very well be shopping on your site in an e-commerce experience. They could be going into the store for the particular organization, and then they come to apply. And if they're feeling different things or they're not having a great experience with that, that's going to translate directly to retail and revenue. Right, so absolutely we're seeing it across that brand and consumer becoming synonymous, and the customer experience as well as what potentially might be an employee experience need to both be great, especially in the retail scape.
And Parker, these are quantifiable metrics that affects top line.
No doubt.
I mean, is this something that, Parker, you think is happening on a geographic basis? In other words, I know you do work around the world. Is there is the U.S. market and U.S. companies ahead of this in terms of this trend, or do you think it's uniformly kind of across markets of how companies think globally around the specific their employment brand and their brand?
I think what we see right now is a lot of companies. So if you look at the UK, for example, and EMEA is more mature in the land of CRM, so they're great at candidate relationship management, right? In the APAC region, they're focusing a lot on the operational processes on the back end and just being able to engage people in a better way. Here in the States or North America, you're really starting to see the trend that you're talking about here, because more and more people don't just want, to put butts in seats, right? What they're looking for is to hire people with the same kind of passion, and they're looking to give those potential candidates a great experience on the front end. So
right.
We're getting a lot of that as we go in. So it's not enough to just, in our case, to be a recruitment process outsourcing organization anymore. It's really about the services and the technology that come along with it that speaks exactly to the second prediction.
Yep. Got it. Should we move on to number 3? So the third prediction that we're going to talk about is that talent is becoming more portable, global, and instant. And I think, people have seen this. This is a trend that's been happening over the last several years. I think this is, again, going to accelerate. You've got data points, Accenture predicting that I think some crazy number like 40 to 50% of the U.S. workforce is going to be freelancers by 2020. I think that's a little exaggerated, but there is data to show that the percentage of freelance in the gig economy is real and is going to continue to grow over the next 3 or 4 years. And I think it's just, again, there's macro trends that are forcing these changes in terms of talent in companies. You think about the 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. We talk about the millennials that are coming into the workforce and kind of how they're thinking about work, which is quite different than it was, even 5. The people that exist, and for these companies that continue to add additional STEM roles, there's just not enough people. And so all of those things, I think, are forcing companies to become much more flexible in terms of how they think about how are we going to grow our organization, and that's leading towards, I think, some of these macro trends of the gig economy and being much more open with and flexible with existing employees. I think we've seen trends where some of these millennials will be able to go on a year-long project.
Mike, I think we're losing your audio a little bit.
No?
Well,
hello?
Nope, we can hear you now.
Oh, sorry. Must be the phone line. So, yeah, I think just finishing up that point, I think this is something that companies are already starting to grapple with and putting investments in technologies that are going to allow them to much more really focus on project-based work, right? So when there's specializations, whether it's cybersecurity or different types of roles, being able to tap into somebody, whether they're in your local market, they're in the U.S. market, they're in a European market that has that skill set, has the ability to connect and dive into that project and help you complete it. I think that is a trend that is going to continue to accelerate, and it's going to force companies into thinking differently about their entire talent acquisition organizations, both in terms of how they attract people, but how they retain those employees going forward. And I'm sure, Parker, you deal with this on a regular basis with your customers.
Yeah, we do. And I think, so there's a couple universal challenges that most organizations have. And I think this goes back to, machine learning. It'll go back to a little bit to this becoming mobile and instant talent as well. But something that's universal across almost all the clients that we engage with is data visibility, right? They have data in the CRM, they have data in ATS, they have data in HRIS, right? And they can't see this data unless they log in each one of those systems, right? And then moreover from that, one of the bigger problems is that they can't search this in a good way. They can't search that data so that it actually searches in the context of that particular need that they have. So if you want to search, for example, for a Node.js developer, but you only want to look at internal talent, that's a huge issue that clients face. So first of all, they can't see all their data sources is one of the first big challenges. The second thing is they can't search that data to make it usable. They may have a dated ATS or some other type of system where it's in there, but they can't really get to the data. So what's happening with machine learning is that's taking a new direction, other than just natural language processing or just if you think about assessment of someone after the apply process. Now you can take machine learning and utilize those tools to do what we call a talent data store. So you can actually integrate the CRM, the ATS, and we're actually designing these systems now and implementing them. But you can tie in CRM, ATS data, HRIS, or learning management system, all in one place and make that completely searchable across the organization, identifying the source. What's more, or what's even better about that is these tools now can actually reach out and enrich data from the web on those records. And so not only can you tie all the data together, most people in organizations don't go into their HRIS system, right, or their HCM and update their most recent qualifications, but they are updating that information on the web. And so once you begin to marry in external data with your internal data, for example, to make a more complete profile. So if you looked at my record, I'd been at your company for 5 years. You're able to reach out and enrich my data from all my social profiles, all my publicly available data. Now things begin to get a bit more interesting. Now you move into the realm of internal mobility and start to looking at prediction algorithms of whether I'm going to leave based on my social signals, right? Mm-hmm. So what we're seeing with this is once you can integrate all those data sources, you do something I saw years ago called the 2-second advantage, right? The 2-second advantage used to be used by casinos, and what they would do is monitor someone until they got to about $400 in losses, right? And they knew they were going to leave the casino. So they used algorithms to look at that, and when someone got to around $350, for example, in losses, they would offer them a ticket to an event on the other side of the casino. So the point with that being, if you can actually see that data married from the web to your employee data and predict if they're going to leave the organization, you can use the same 2-second advantage to maybe use your bot or an onboarding tool, for example, to reach out and engage those individuals or give them a call. Why does it look like they're leaving the organization? Are they having any issues? And just to re-engage that talent that you have internally as well. Mm-hmm. So we're getting past this initial realm of siloed data because there are tools that can use a machine learning algorithm acting effectively as the brain of the organization to be able to search that talent contextually across the enterprise.
Yep.
All right, so moving on to prediction number 4. The employer-talent relationship lasts throughout the entire career. Now, for a lot of industries, this is going to look very, very different. But if we take a use case of the technology industry and maybe Boston, where we are, as a microcosm of why this is so important and why cultivating this relationship is going to be important, I know personally a number of people who have worked at a company, left and gone to another company for a new opportunity, and then come back to that same company at a later date. And part of this is because of the internal mobility that they're really looking to do. So when we talk about in the past, recruitment marketing, we're talking about the candidate or the applicant who may be a candidate and trying to build a relationship there. But then we've got another scenario, which is really the lifelong relationship with the candidates. And it's more than just about maybe not right now, maybe later. That's one side of it. But when we need to get creative about the talent shortage, what we're doing, what we're training, there's a part of this that we think is really important. As we look to the future, to 2020 to 2025, one of the things that we're seeing in some of the data is the relationship that the folks who are employed have with the outside market. To what Parker was just saying, when we look at that 2-second rule, if you can find when your great talent is looking to go somewhere else for whatever reason, that's a really, really powerful tool. But then what do we do with it? What happens after that point? And that's what comes back to this employer-talent relationship. If we flip over to the next slide, we've got different generations and what they look for applying for a job. And right at the top of it, it's opportunity to learn and grow. So those examples that I mentioned earlier are about people who looked for opportunities to learn and grow outside of the organization because for whatever reason, they just didn't see it inside of their own organization. But then the good brand development that had been created between the employee and the employer brought them back at a future date when there was yet another opportunity for them to learn and to grow. So when we talk about lost productivity, upskilling of employees, that employer relationship with folks and understanding the internal mobility engine that companies can take advantage of, it's going to be a real mover in the future. Thinking about, are there courses? Are there certifications? How does this person get to that next hard-to-find role? How do we grow our internal team, people who are going to be technical leaders or management leaders or operational leaders? We want to be able to get these employees engaged through all levels of the organization. And when we talk about a lot of what we're doing with recruitment marketing, a lot of it is outwardly facing today. But the future is going to be just as important with the internal mobility, the internal facing aspect of what we're talking about. And that really talks about maintaining relationships even with alumni in different areas. So for me, I really see the engagement as an employer, the opportunities internally, and how we leverage that and recruit internally is one of the biggest things we're going to be doing in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I'd like to double down on that. This idea of what we talk about, connecting people to your mission, I think is the long view of how companies are starting to think about talent, right? It's not really a transactional, I've got this job, I evaluate you at a point in time, we hire you, and then you go into another system, and then it's a whole different way of evaluating you, and then you leave, and we totally forget about you. I think the understanding of a company is saying, taking a step back, saying, what are the types of people, what are the types of skills, what are the types of values that we want to bring into the organization, not at the job level, but just helping think through how are we going to get to continue to grow the company. And then it's understanding how do you bring those people in, attract them to your company, and build those relationships at scale, right? And I think that's the hard part that is going to get easier with the sort of hyper-connectedness of how people are, the idea of machine learning and AI. All those things are going to make it possible so that companies can look at people, who they are, their values, their skill sets more holistically, so that even if you got to a point within an organization where it was time for you to move on to some other opportunity, the thought around that is to stay in touch with you such that in a year or two, and we do this at SmashFly, we've had people leave, and what we've wanted to say is, hey, it's probably a good time for you to make a career move to get to the next rung. But when you get there in 2 or 3 years, you're going to be in a prime position with the right skills to come back and help us grow in these other places. So having a view to seeing talent that way holistically, I think will help organizations put the right processes, the right technology in place to help foster those relationships. And those are the ones that are going to consistently have more access to the right talent to grow versus people that look at it from, hey, these are new leads, these are my employees, these are my alumni.
There's a good second order of effect too, Mike, where the person that is ready to leave and wants to move on to another position with another company, if they're already a part of your value proposition for the business, then when they're ready to go, opening up their network to the kinds of values and mission that company has because they know it so well is a really big advantage as well. So if you're fostering those relationships, even if you're looking 3 or 4 years down the road, those networks that exist today are also helpful for businesses to then go after that market where they share the same values, the same vision, the same mission.
Yeah, and I think, to talk to some companies, for those companies, they take a very proactive approach around that. I was talking to a company recently where when people were leaving the company, they would actually send them a gift basket with swag on their way out as a good, thank you for your effort, and again, to keep that goodwill, to keep them connected. So when they are out there at a new opportunity, they're just, again, word of mouth saying positive things about the company that it came from. And again, that's a big part of recruitment marketing, is making sure that you're getting your message out and having people amplify that in the marketplace. So I think that is going to be a trend. We've talked to some companies where they just bite their tongue and say, yeah, I just can't do it. They left us. They're dead to me. But I think that's going to be not the norm going forward.
Yeah, I think I love what you guys are talking about especially around the internal marketing of employees for internal jobs, for example, to let them know that there are opportunities to move around the organization. But if they are going to leave, it's important to create that boomerang effect, right? Let them build their skills elsewhere, come back to your organization to do that. I mean, I myself am a boomerang employee for all those same reasons. Some kind of example of that. And I think, when we're talking about what generations look for when they're applying for a job, some of it is just about the internal pieces of an organization as well. But, I'm a Gen Xer with millennial tendencies is what I tell everybody. So, I want a omni-channel approach to be able to engage an organization, which might mean, while someone else my age may take the traditional route, I may take the bot route and engage with your organization in that way. And then why couldn't that bot follow me through my career with you? Right, and know who I am when I have questions or I want to re-engage in specific areas, or even present internal jobs to me, for example, that fit my skill set at the time. So great conversation around that. Enjoyed it.
Great. And this last prediction is, and I don't think this is going out there too far as a prediction, but simple, beautiful experiences are going to be a premium and be extremely important for companies. I think this is a long time in coming. I think it's kind of we've been moving in this direction for a while. I think if you think about the traditional process of how companies have attracted candidates. It's been a very difficult process going back to just the clunky ATS driven. It takes me a long time to find a job, and when I finally get it, you force me to go through this registration process, and then 45 minutes later, maybe my resume gets into the system, maybe it doesn't, maybe I hear back, maybe I don't, and it's no wonder that what our data shows is that even today, 74% of people who start the apply process drop out. And that's really one reason. It's because the experience is just god-awful. And I think companies it wasn't that they had bad intentions. Part of a recruiter and what a company was trying to do with these early day ATSs is, listen, we get too many applicants, right? So let's put up and ask as many questions and pre-filter as many people as we can so that only the ones that are maybe have the strength to get through the 45 questions get in, and then it limits the amount of resumes we need to look at, and that's better for us. And I think it's understandable because a lot of these recruiters have to deal with hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes, and how do you deal with that? I think what's happened is that this is all flipped, right? Now it's not about relying on a recruiter to have to manually review thousands of resumes, and therefore it becomes much more advantageous for a company to provide a much more flexible, a much simpler, a much more elegant experience for candidates, making it easier. I think people might cringe, or recruiters might cringe at that, but making it easy for them to get their information into your company so that you can consider them, and then using automation, using artificial intelligence to be able to sift through and really bubble up the best candidates that are out there. So I think that a lot of the things that we've predicted here are driving this, right? We've seen the consumerization of business applications in general, right? Everybody can get to most of their business applications on their mobile phone. It's simple, it's easy to connect and get what you want to, and I think that's a trend that's happening now in the candidate experience. It's been happening for a number of years with the candies, right? There's benchmarks that now companies can see how are we doing for our candidate experience versus our competitors, and so that benchmark, I think, is critical in the marketplace because it allows companies and TA organizations to really start understanding these experiences are actually having a big impact on their ability to get the best talent into their organizations, and they can see how they're doing versus the competition. So I think that's a trend that's going to continue, and I think when we see some of the other technologies that we've talked about today, like chatbot, just a better experience. I can come in, I don't have to send an email in or submit a form and say, what are your benefits? I can get that information in real time. And those experiences are going to drive engagement. And when you drive engagement, you're much more likely to get people to be attracted and nurture and convert those into top quality applicants in your system. So this will be a continuing trend, and I think with some of the technologies we've been talking about, chatbots, things like AI and machine learning to get much smarter at matching candidates to positions, those are all going to be things that companies are embracing and will just be table stakes in 2020.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, to my point earlier when we were talking about this, there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to engage with your organization, give you my information, my resume, whatever it is, have a quick engagement that gets you enough data to make it, an initial decision on whether you want to talk to me or not with my thumb. I should be able to do that with my thumb. Show I'm interested in the organization, give you my contact information so that you can reach out to me. All that needs to be a simple, beautiful experience. And the reality is it can today. There's no reason why that application process has to be the very first thing people engage with. Let them show an interest, have a conversation with them, and then hit them with the paperwork, right? after you've had a great discussion.
And I think that is part of I think that's the macro trend that is going to happen, which is, traditionally the only call to action for companies is, here's my job, and if you want to apply and become an applicant, here's your one thing that you can do. And it's take it or leave it. And I think the market is definitely coming around to the fact that hey, there's a lot of people who aren't looking for a job right now, right? I think the 2017 LinkedIn employment report shows that only 12% of people are actively out on Google or Indeed or LinkedIn actually searching for a job and ready to apply, while 88% of them are quite happy where they are. And so, we've talked about this. We use the 88% a lot in our own talks. But if you want to tap into a much larger set of talent that you can drive your organization, you need to be thinking about how do you get in front with those 88%. And putting up a 45-minute apply process is not going to be it. So to your point, Parker, the swipe of a thumb, the click here, drop my information off, and then, again, using a process and automation so that, again, you got to be able to do this at scale. Those experiences have to be simple for the candidate, which I think we can do, but for the recruiter and the organization, how do you enable them to start building up those relationships through automation over time, such that when the right opportunity comes across the candidate's desk, he can basically raise his hand, and he's already done. The company already knows who they are. They've made those connections, and that process becomes just a far superior one than it is today. And I think everybody on this phone is and companies out there are striving towards creating those much simpler, elegant experiences to reduce just the massive amount of friction that exists today.
Yep, totally agree. So, Allison,
Awesome.
do we want to wrap it up, open up for questions?
Yeah, sounds great. Unless anybody has any final thoughts to share around the future of recruiting, we can move it right over to the Q&A. Sound good?
That's good.
Good on my end.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to the three of you. This has been an awesome, 3/4 of an hour, and I've sure learned a lot. I hope our audience has as well. So now we'll move over to some of the questions we've gotten during the content. And to our audience, I would encourage you, if you have any questions lingering in the back of your mind, maybe you haven't submitted it yet. We haven't gotten too many through the box, so please feel free to submit that now. One question that we did have was, and I think this is really interesting, one person on the call has a fundamental issue with the resume and the idea of machine learning matching to competencies in the resume, because the whole person isn't reflected in their CV. There's passions, there's a life there. There are things that maybe are missing. So I don't know, do any of you have thoughts around how maybe machine learning will hopefully grow more sophisticated as an answer to that and be better able to accommodate the whole picture of someone? How does that kind of reconcile with, finding fit for values or connecting people back to your mission?
So I've got some ideas on that.
Okay.
So
we all do. Go,
Thom. It's really interesting that you bring that up about where is the value of the candidate as the holistic candidate. I think one thing we really haven't talked about is what is the candidate's role in recruiting in 2020. And one of the trends that I've seen is a lot of candidates, especially ones that are deeply connected to finding a purposeful mission with an employer, is they will actually focus on what their personal brand is. They're very cognizant of what's on Facebook. They're cognizant of what people can find out about them online. And they're developing that personal brand so that it markets. And if you look at what LinkedIn is doing, it's really interesting about the types of things that you can list on LinkedIn. And when you talk about the whole person, you can add volunteer opportunities that you've done, patents that you have, groups that you belong to, things that you're interested in, the employers that you've worked for. I think that's one of those areas. As we start to see more and more applicants develop their personal brand, it's not so much the smarter machine learning is going to be able to magically divine all this information, but machine learning is going to continue to grow and continue to become more intelligent over time as people continue to develop their personal brands. So the holistic aspect of an applicant, being able to see what groups are they following, What groups are they associated with? How do they volunteer? Where have they been employed? I think that really starts to help drive a holistic picture of an applicant.
Yeah, I think that what you said at the end there is, I'll just double down on that, is one of the things that we've been looking at, because there's already been a lot of research on this, is, the resume absolutely is a single piece of information, has nothing to do with a personality, with the skills, with values, with their perception on life, everything like that are things that companies really do care about. And so the advent of social networks and the quote unquote digital footprints that people are leaving are now things that actually can be analyzed and evaluated, both in terms of understanding personality traits. So the things that you're doing, and again, this is all opt-in, it's not Big Brotherish, but if a candidate comes in and says, I'd like to share with who I am on Facebook or LinkedIn and these other places, that data can be sucked into engines to understand, what do you click on? What do you like? Are you, if you're big on green and clicking on those types of things or those types of articles, all of that can be processed and analyzed to understand if that is another data point that helps people understand if you're a fit for their organization in terms of matching to your values, vision, and so forth. So I think the general process that companies should be thinking about is, how do we think about amassing as much possible data around people to understand who they are, and resume is one thing, but all of the other things we're talking about, there's just a ton of information out there that can be brought into some of these algorithms to get more, much smarter about making those connections.
Yeah, on the assessment piece, I think it's still up a bit to the candidate to be able to provide the right relevant information about themselves, but you have to balance that without dehumanizing the process, right? So what I like about the algorithm approach and looking at resumes is, the reality is, if you get 500 applicants, for example, to an organization, you're not letting the algorithm make the decision. All the algorithm is doing is saying, look, based on the qualifications you said with the job, and based on the information this person gave me, are they a fit for that particular job from a qualifications perspective? But what I like about that is the machine learning algorithm can actually do it more consistently across 500 resumes and do all the resumes, where a human simply can't do that, not with enough time to be able to get them hired and onboarded through the process. So it's the speed of that. It's also the consistency of that. And what I like about that first line of the algorithm anyway is that, what you're doing is, you don't need gender, you don't need ethnicity, you don't have to introduce any of those bias elements to the process in order to get the right level of diversity in the organization. So the algorithm doesn't care about those components. It only cares if you're qualified or not. And then you let the algorithm basically recommend to you, just based on skill sets, pure skill sets, who are the right people that may be qualified for this, so that recruiters are spending their time getting on the phone and talking with people that are qualified for the particular role. So it's a balance of that. I don't think we ever reach a spot where we're removing the human from that particular process, but the algorithms can help us get more predictive. And the way we look at it is to get to the right person, to have the right conversation more quickly. And if we can remove bias in that, unconscious bias or otherwise, from the process, I think there's some real opportunity there.
Excellent. Thanks for all sharing your insight on that question. Another question we have is actually questions, plural. We have a lot of folks wondering more about chatbots. So some folks have asked, do we have any idea of what percentage of companies are already using chatbots as part of their recruiting process, or even any great examples of companies successfully leveraging a chatbot? And also, how do you view the sort of more interruptive or urgent nature of the chatbot experience versus the more traditional apply process? Is that going to affect the volume of candidates coming in? Thoughts?
Well, I'll jump into it from the clients that we see. I'd say at this point, about 5% of our clients are actually using or beginning to use the chatbot piece. What's happening is the technology on the back end from a chatbot perspective is maturing very quickly. The adoption of organizations is obviously lagging a little bit behind that curve. So we'd say about 5% of our clients are using it, begin to use it successfully. that we're seeing in the marketplace today. So I think that's one angle. If we're talking about the volume of candidates coming through, the reality is it's just like a house. You don't have one door to your house, right, normally. So you have to have many doors to get into your organization. And when I mentioned before an omni-channel approach, while that might apply to sourcing, it also has to apply in a way that a candidate can engage. So a bot might pop up on a particular screen. I don't want to use a bot, so I close it and I go to the traditional route. So what we're seeing is about 60% of the people will engage with the bot to ask questions, and then when they're done with that or they want to move through a different part of the process, or if they don't find the answer they're looking for, they simply close it, get it out of the way, and go to the more traditional routes. So I don't know if you make the bot your only front entrance to your organization, for example, but I do think you make it one of those channels that a person can experience if they're like me, and that's the way they'd rather progress and engage with an organization. So I don't think it hurts the drop-off rate, but I do think it drives candidate experience.
I'd add that the candidate experience, too, depends on the medium. So if you look at some of the cool things that have happened recently with chatbots, Marriott, for example, they actually integrate their chatbot with Facebook Messenger, Slack. I think they've got WeChat in the APAC region already up and running, but they've actually leveraged their chatbots in the environments that the people that stay at the Marriott are already using. So, Parker, when we're talking about where are chatbots successful and where are they working, I think that's one aspect that's really important. A chatbot like Verizon, for example, that simply lives on the Verizon site, that requires someone to log into Verizon, go through the authentication questions, and then get access to a chat once you can find it on the page, is a very different experience to what Mike was talking about earlier about user experience, is a very different experience than, say, using a chatbot inside of Slack, which you're using every day already.
Yeah, and I think just in terms of the, how many people are using it today, I do think, my sense in talking to our customers is that this is a relatively, not that chatbots are brand new, but the idea of, talking about chatbots and moving it to actually implement on their career sites and how they're going to leverage it. We do see that momentum shift, I think, just in the last 2 or 3 months. We announced our partnership with Paradox AI. Our customers are much more coming to us, and I think, if you look at now when customers are coming in and looking at solutions to help them automate a lot of this recruiting and recruitment marketing, chatbots seem to be involved at the forefront of all of those conversations. So I think 2018 you're going to see, I just think about our own customers. I would expect a fair, maybe 15-20% of our customers moving and implementing chatbot technology, and I think that will just continue to grow.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on all these questions, guys. It was wonderful having you on the call today. We're getting so many more wonderful questions, but with 1 minute left, I can't possibly choose between them. So I'm going to say, why don't we wrap it up for today, and keep an eye on the SmashFly blog. When we get a lot of great questions, sometimes we like to follow up right on the blog so that, you can hopefully get answers to your burning questions. But Parker, Thom, Mike, thank you so much for your time today. And to our audience, thanks for joining us. I really hope you enjoyed the discussion. Keep an eye out on your email inbox for these slides and recording in the next day or so. Thanks so much,
Great.
everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Take care.